When an avoidant realizes they can't play you anymore, it doesn't create regret. And that's important to understand, because regret comes from love, attachment, and emotional responsibility. If someone was truly playing you, you were never part of their emotional world, you were part of their routine, you filled time, you regulated boredom, you absorbed attention without demanding accountability. So when the game ends, what breaks is not their heart, it's their habit. And habits, when interrupted, don't create remorse. They create irritation, restlessness, and a need to regain control. Now, this is not about labeling every avoidant as bad or heartless. This video is not against people who struggle with closeness, but still act with honesty and care. This is specifically about those who know exactly what they are doing, those who intentionally engage with innocent, emotionally open, deeply empathetic people, while hiding a manipulative mindset. These are the ones who benefit from your patience, your understanding, your silence, and your emotional availability, while giving nothing stable in return. They aren't confused, they aren't unaware, they are comfortable using empathy as access. So when that access ends, what they feel is not guilt, it's disruption. This video isn't about hoping they feel bad. It's not about revenge, validation, or proving a point. It's about understanding what actually happens inside someone who was playing a role, and what happens when that role no longer works. In this video, we uncover 5 things that happen with avoidants when their game is exposed, how their mindset shifts, and exactly what you should do at each stage to stay emotionally protected and permanently out of their cycle. So let's start. The first thing that happens inside an avoidant when their games are exposed is frustration. This is not emotional regret or guilt. It originates purely from the disruption of their habitual patterns. For someone whose interactions have always been guided by control, predictability, and routine, the moment that structure fails, their mind experiences irritation. The comfort that used to come from manipulating attention, subtly provoking reactions, or maintaining emotional distance is suddenly unavailable. This is the initial trigger that sets off a chain of internal responses, and it's crucial to understand that this frustration is habit-driven, not attachment-driven. Imagine an avoidant who has relied on certain predictable behaviors to maintain influence. They might habitually check in at specific times, create emotional ups and downs to elicit responses, or engineer small moments of tension to keep the other person invested. When these mechanisms fail because you no longer respond, set boundaries, or disengage, their internal equilibrium is disrupted. The frustration they feel is their routine being blocked. The sense of control they took for granted is no longer operative, and their mind becomes restless, searching for ways to restore familiar patterns. This habitual frustration is often accompanied by subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in their behavior and thoughts. They may pace, frown, or sit in thought longer than usual, feeling mentally agitated without fully realizing why. Their usual ease with manipulating situations is replaced by a sense of incompleteness or unease. It's important to note that this frustration is deeply impersonal. It is not about missing you or feeling emotional loss. It's about losing the predictability that their habitual behavior relied upon. In daily life, you might notice signs of this internal frustration through small cues. They may attempt minor interactions to gauge if the pattern can be re-established. Subtle, repeated gestures, like lingering over texts, revisiting old jokes, or revisiting shared routines, often emerge. These are not authentic efforts to reconnect, but manifestations of the mind trying to regain the lost habitual comfort. Their mental energy is consumed by noticing how routines that once worked no longer yield results. Even logically, this makes sense. Anyone whose behavior is strongly habit-driven experiences irritation when routines are disrupted. The avoidant's habitual control over interactions is their mental tool for managing comfort and boredom. When it fails, the frustration is immediate, visible in thought patterns and subtle behaviors. They may mentally replay scenarios, calculating what worked before and why it no longer does, as if testing a formula that suddenly refuses to function. This is why the first reaction inside an avoidant is frustration that feels sharp, restless, and persistent, but never genuinely remorseful. They are grappling with the breakdown of predictability, not with attachment or emotional depth. It's a reaction to a broken system, not a broken heart. Understanding this helps you see why their subsequent behaviors, attempts to regain control, subtle triggers, or mental agitation, stem from habit disruption rather than any form of genuine care. In essence, habitual frustration is the starting point of their inner experience when the games are exposed. It's a signal that their comfort mechanisms have failed, and their mind is shifting into problem-solving mode, not self-reflection or empathy. Recognizing this pattern helps you distinguish frustration from regret, and lays the foundation for understanding the next stages of their mental response. The second thing that happens inside an avoidant when their games are exposed is mental discomfort without regret. This is an important distinction to make because many people confuse their internal agitation with remorse or emotional care. In reality, what the avoidant experiences is disturbance stemming from a broken habit, not from emotional attachment. The moment they realize their usual patterns no longer function, their mind becomes restless, continuously analyzing and recalculating the situation. This discomfort is very methodical in nature. Unlike regret, which emerges from feelings of guilt or emotional loss, this mental unrest originates purely from the disruption of their predictable system of influence. Their habitual behaviors, subtle manipulations, controlled emotional distance, or orchestrated attention-seeking, fail to yield the results they once relied upon. The mind, accustomed to operating within this framework, now encounters uncertainty. And humans, especially avoidants who thrive on control, naturally react to uncertainty with mental agitation. During this stage you might notice subtle signs of internal unrest. They may appear more preoccupied, lost in thought, or unusually contemplative. Small behaviors that were automatic before, checking for responses, timing interactions, or calculating your engagement, start requiring conscious effort because the habitual feedback loop is broken. The discomfort manifests as repetitive thinking, where they analyze past patterns, predict possible reactions, and imagine strategies to restore control. This mental looping is exhausting for them because it contrasts sharply with their usual effortless manipulation. It's also key to note that this discomfort does not include emotional longing. They are not sad because of missing you or because they care for you in a genuine sense. The disturbance is mechanical. They are reacting to the absence of familiar control mechanisms. In a way, their mind is akin to a machine detecting a broken circuit. The familiar flow of influence is interrupted, creating stress, restlessness, and a persistent need to re-establish equilibrium. Another element of this stage is hyper-analysis of your behavior. They might mentally replay interactions, dissect your responses, and search for patterns they can exploit to regain predictability. Their attention is entirely self-focused. They want to understand why their habitual system failed, not because they feel emotionally connected. Every thought is about reasserting what once gave them ease, not about repairing or nurturing the relationship. The intensity of this mental discomfort often surprises people because it may appear like deep introspection or even emotional reaction. In truth, the third thing that happens inside an avoidant when their games are exposed is restless urges. After experiencing habitual frustration and mental discomfort without regret, the avoidant enters a stage where their mind starts generating internal impulses to regain influence. These urges are subtle, persistent, and often repetitive. They push the avoidant to attempt strategic re-engagement, testing behaviors or subtle manipulations designed to restore predictability in their interactions. Restless urges are not motivated by care, love, or genuine emotional attachment. Instead, they emerge as a response to the disruption of control. The avoidance mind has become agitated because the habitual system they relied upon, the routine of influence, manipulation, and emotional regulation, no longer works as intended. The absence of expected outcomes triggers a kind of internal agitation, which manifests as these repetitive urges. They feel compelled to act, not because they want a meaningful connection, but because the familiar pattern is broken and their internal equilibrium is disturbed. During this stage, you might notice subtle shifts in behavior if you are observing closely. The avoidant may attempt small tests of your boundaries, engage in teasing, or send ambiguous messages to see if they can reassert control. They may mentally rehearse strategies to pull you back into the interaction or to gauge your reactions. These thoughts often cycle continuously, creating a pattern of obsessive mental processing. Their attention is entirely focused on restoring their comfort and predictability rather than acknowledging your feelings or needs. These urges can also lead to impulsive actions. They might suddenly reach out after a period of silence, comment in ways designed to provoke a response, or employ indirect tactics to gauge emotional reactions. Even minor interactions can become experiments, where their goal is to observe and influence, not to connect authentically. The cyclical nature of these urges means that they often repeat the same behaviors or mental strategies multiple times, trying to recreate the sense of control they once had. It is crucial to understand that these urges are internal and habitual. The avoidant may appear calm externally, but internally, their mind is restless, calculating, and preoccupied with the question of how to regain influence. Their focus is self-centered, emphasizing predictability, routine, and habitual power dynamics rather than relational or emotional connection. They do not feel remorse for past behavior or regret for how their manipulation affected you. These urges are purely functional, aiming to restore their internal sense of control. This stage also highlights why avoidance can seem persistent or difficult to disengage from. The restless urges drive repeated attempts to influence or interact with you, even after their usual strategies have failed. The key is that their actions are habit-driven. They are responses to the breakdown of the internal system they rely on, not emotional expressions or genuine attempts to repair the relationship. In summary, restless urges mark the third stage of an avoidance internal process when their habitual games are exposed. Following habitual frustration and mental discomfort without regret, these urges push them toward repeated testing, subtle manipulations, and mental strategizing. The intensity of these urges is a reflection of lost control and unpredictability, not of care, love, or emotional responsibility. Recognizing this stage is essential to understanding the avoidant mindset and protecting yourself from being drawn back into their habitual patterns. The fourth thing that happens inside an avoidant when their games are exposed is their attempts to reassert control. After experiencing habitual frustration, mental discomfort without regret, and restless urges, the avoidant enters a phase where their mind actively searches for ways to regain influence and predictability. This stage is characterized by strategic thinking, careful observation, and deliberate behaviors, all aimed at restoring the internal system of habitual control that was disrupted. At this point, the avoidant begins to plan subtle tactics. They may think of sending messages, teasing remarks, or using emotional triggers designed to evoke a predictable response. These behaviors are not expressions of care or attachment. Rather, they are calculated moves intended to re-establish the routine they relied on. Messaging might be deliberately spaced, teasing might provoke curiosity, and emotional cues could be deployed to elicit a specific reaction from you. Every action is a strategy to see if the previous dynamic can be restored. Their attempts are often indirect and measured, reflecting their avoidant nature. They are unlikely to confront the situation openly or express genuine concern. Instead, they use subtle cues and manipulations, testing boundaries and observing your responses. This behavior might appear playful or casual on the surface, but internally, the avoidant is focused on restoring predictability and habitual influence. Their goal is not to create an authentic connection, but to re-establish a system in which their actions produce the expected emotional feedback and control. In this phase, avoidance may also employ unexpected behaviors. This could include sudden attentiveness, occasional vulnerability, or unpredictable communication patterns designed to destabilize and then observe your reaction. These actions are carefully monitored in their mind. They analyze each response, each pause, and each emotional cue to determine if their habitual influence can be reintroduced. The avoidance thinking is highly strategic, resembling a mental chess game where every move is calculated to regain stability and routine. It is important to understand that these attempts are self-serving. The avoidant is not motivated by remorse, empathy, or a desire to repair a genuine emotional connection. Their actions are purely focused on restoring the habitual system that gave them comfort, attention, and predictability. They measure the effectiveness of their tactics not by your well-being, but by the degree to which they can manipulate, predict, or influence the situation again. During this stage, their mind can become preoccupied with strategy. They mentally rehearse scenarios, anticipate your reactions, and continuously adjust their approach. Every interaction is analyzed for clues about how to regain habitual control. This often results in a cyclical pattern of trial, observation, and adjustment, which can appear confusing or inconsistent to the person on the receiving end. Ultimately, attempts to reassert control mark a critical stage in the avoidance internal process. Following frustration, discomfort, and restless urges, this is where their focus shifts to strategic action. They try to manipulate, test, and provoke predictable outcomes, all in service of restoring their habitual patterns. Understanding this stage allows you to recognize that these behaviors are not signs of care or attachment, but attempts to regain control. Recognizing this helps you maintain clarity, protect your boundaries, and avoid being drawn back into the habitual cycle they attempt to reinstate. The fifth and final thing that happens inside an avoidant when their games are exposed is what can be called strategic obsession. After experiencing habitual frustration, mental discomfort without regret, restless urges, and multiple attempts to reassert control, the avoidant enters a phase where their mind becomes almost entirely consumed with planning, analyzing, and predicting their next moves. This is the culmination of their internal process, a stage where their habitual manipulative mindset reaches its peak intensity. At this point, the avoidant's thoughts are dominated by continuous mental calculation. They replay every interaction, every subtle cue, and every past response, seeking patterns that could indicate opportunities to regain influence. Every text you send, every pause, and every reaction is scrutinized meticulously in their mind. The goal is not to understand or connect emotionally, but to identify leverage points that restore predictability and habitual control. Their mental energy is entirely devoted to creating a scenario in which the routine they once relied on is reinstated. During this stage, avoidants strategize relentlessly. They mentally test scenarios, imagine potential outcomes, and anticipate how you might respond under different circumstances. Messaging strategies, teasing, subtle provocations, and emotionally triggered behaviors are all considered carefully. Each plan is evaluated for effectiveness in re-establishing the predictable dynamic they crave. This strategic obsession is often repetitive and cyclical. They revise plans constantly, thinking through contingencies and assessing how much control they can exert without risking exposure of their true intentions. One key aspect of this stage is that their focus is almost entirely self-serving. They are not motivated by empathy, remorse, or genuine care. Their obsession is about regaining control, influence, and predictability. Any thoughts about you as a person or your emotional state are secondary, if they exist at all. The avoidant's mind measures success not by authentic connection, but by the degree to which they can restore habitual power over attention, interaction, and the flow of the dynamic. The intensity of this stage often leads to heightened vigilance and preoccupation. They may analyze even minor reactions for potential openings, testing boundaries indirectly. This obsessive strategizing can continue over extended periods, manifesting in subtle behaviors designed to probe, manipulate, or gauge responses. Every interaction is carefully monitored, every pause mentally accounted for, and every response is used as data to plan the next move. Strategic obsession also highlights the predictable pattern of avoidance. Even as they plan, they maintain emotional detachment. They may attempt engagement that appears spontaneous or caring, but underlying it is a calculated strategy aimed at restoring habitual control. Their fixation is on systematic influence, not emotional reciprocity. Ultimately, this stage demonstrates how deeply habitual and manipulative an avoidance mindset can operate. Strategic obsession is the peak of their internal process, where their thoughts, analyses, and actions are all focused on reinstating control and predictability. Recognizing this stage allows you to understand that any seemingly targeted behaviors or attentions are not signs of genuine care. They are the final efforts of a habitual system trying to reassert itself. Understanding strategic obsession equips you to remain grounded, observe calmly, and avoid being drawn back into their cycle. By seeing through this intense mental preoccupation, you can protect your emotional energy and maintain clear boundaries, ensuring that you no longer become part of their habitual games. Dear friends, the most important thing to remember is that you don't need to react to their habits, obsessions, or attempts to regain control. Your role is no longer part of their cycle, and staying grounded is the most powerful move you can make. First, observe calmly. Avoidants rely on your reactions to maintain their habitual patterns. The moment you respond emotionally, engage in overthinking, or try to justify their behavior, you give them back the influence they were trying to regain. By watching quietly, without judgment or impulsive responses, you break the feedback loop. Your calmness itself communicates that you are no longer a tool for their control. Second, protect your boundaries. Be clear about what you will and won't tolerate in your life. This is not about punishment or revenge, it's about self-respect and emotional safety. Boundaries create a space where your energy isn't drained by manipulation, subtle games, or attempts to pull you back into their world. Write them down, visualize them, and enforce them consistently. Third, invest in yourself. Spend time on activities that build your confidence, joy, and independence. Surround yourself with people who truly value your presence. Focus on hobbies, work, or projects that make you feel strong, capable, and fulfilled. The more centered you become, the less power their habitual manipulations can hold over you. Fourth, acknowledge your feelings. It's natural to feel residual frustration, confusion, or even curiosity. Accept these emotions without letting them dictate your actions. Journaling, meditation, or talking with trusted friends can help you process everything and prevent old patterns from creeping back. Finally, stay committed to your peace. Don't chase explanations, apologies, or validation. Your freedom and emotional stability are more important than understanding the avoidance strategy. Over time, their attempts to influence you will fade, and you will feel lighter, stronger, and more in control of your life. Remember, staying still, grounded, and self-focused is your most effective response. You are stepping out of the cycle, reclaiming your energy, and proving that your well-being comes first. If you found this guidance helpful, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us how you are implementing these steps and supporting your emotional growth. Your journey matters, and your strength inspires others.